All right, let's talk about how to get those juicy triceps. This advice will be in the context of muscle growth specifically, so keep that in mind when you hear my recommendations. If you want big arms, then you need to be training your triceps because they actually make up the majority of your upper arm. As the name indicates, the tricep is composed of three distinct heads: the long head, the lateral head, and the medial head. Collectively, these three parts of the tricep perform elbow extension or straightening of the elbow. I see lots of self-proclaimed fitness experts online claiming that they have different tricep extension variations for biasing each distinct head of the triceps, but my own evaluation of the current literature on this suggests otherwise. While there's not a lot of data on it, I was able to find 2 studies investigating triceps activation based on shoulder position. One of them found that there was no difference, and the other found slightly more activation of the medial head when the shoulder was elevated above 90 degrees. So I think it's safe to say that collectively these results are not thorough enough, nor are they conclusive enough to inform our training decisions. It's also worth mentioning that these studies use surface EMGs to collect data, which aren't totally reliable when used in isolation. The lack of ability to target specific heads of the triceps is further evidenced by the fact that I personally have tried numerous tricep variations in my own training and haven't found a single one that allows me to feel more tension in one head of my triceps over another. Nor have I found one that has contributed to more growth in one head of my triceps over another either. With that being said, I think it's best practice to train the triceps by simply performing elbow extension movements. I would suggest including 2 elbow extension variations in your program, one overhead and one with your arm against your side. The reason I suggest this is because of the long head of the triceps. The long head of the triceps is a biarticular muscle, meaning that it crosses 2 joints, with those 2 joints being the shoulder and the elbow. Since it crosses the shoulder joint, the long head of the triceps not only acts to extend the elbow, but also acts to extend the shoulder. So when we put our shoulder into a high degree of flexion and bend our elbow, we place a deep stretch on the long head. By placing it into a deep stretch under high forces, we will get better muscle growth, so using an overhead variation as your primary tricep exercise is likely a good idea. You can use machines, dumbbells, barbells, or cables to accomplish this, with my personal preference being cables, since we can change the direction that the resistance force is coming from. I suggest setting up the cable so that it forms roughly a 90-degree angle with your forearm at the bottom of the movement. This will ensure that peak resistance is occurring in that bottom position, thus yielding more hypertrophy or muscle growth. As I mentioned earlier, the second variation of elbow extension I would suggest including is one where your elbow is against your side. This offers a slightly different beginning muscle length for the long head, and while it may or may not affect involvement of each head of the triceps individually, I think it's good to include anyway for the sake of variety. This exercise also offers a slightly different feel than the overhead variation, so I don't think it's totally redundant to include. Including a second variation in your program can also increase your desire to train, since doing a ton of volume on one variation gets old very quickly and can potentially beat up your joints a little bit more than if you split up your volume between 2 different variations. When performing this type of tricep extension, I would suggest allowing your elbow to translate backwards on the eccentric or the negative phase of the movement, since this will maximize the amount of torque occurring at the elbow joint in the stretched position. For both of these variations, I suggest using an easy curl bar cable attachment. This provides better stability than the commonly used tricep rope attachment, thus allowing you to produce more force with your triceps. If you do not feel a high degree of tension in your triceps with either of these variations, then I would suggest trying a tricep extension where your upper arm is behind your torso. As I mentioned, the long head of the triceps acts to extend the shoulder, so if you hold your arm behind your body, this will allow the long head to get into its fully shortened position. We tend to be able to form a better mind-muscle connection when we train in the fully shortened position, so this type of tricep extension is a viable option for people who do not feel their triceps working with the first 2 variations I described. If you do choose to perform your tricep extensions in this manner, be sure to use a cable and not a dumbbell. Using a dumbbell will only offer resistance in the second half of the movement, and for muscle growth purposes, we want to be sure to load the muscle through its entire full range of motion. The triceps also assist in many other exercises, such as pressing motions to extend the elbow and in straight arm lat pullovers to extend the shoulder. Because these exercises stimulate the triceps and you likely already have some of them in your program, my recommendation for tricep volume is far lower than for other muscle groups. I would suggest performing anywhere between 4 and 12 sets per week, split among 2 or 3 sessions if you want the best growth. Any load between 30 and 85% of your estimated 1 rep max in the 5 to 30 rep range will cause roughly an equivalent amount of growth, so long as you are training equivalently close to failure in each scenario. My personal preference is to train somewhere in the 8 to 15 rep range, as that is where I feel the most pump, tension, local fatigue, and subsequent soreness in my triceps. Choose whichever exercise, rep range, and load allows you to feel the same, making changes when things begin to get stale. Keep a training log to ensure your performance is improving over time, adding sets, reps, load, or some combination thereof over time, and you're on your way to having big triceps. Enjoy the gains.